So my first question to you guys would be why Brazil is becoming a form of a magnet for world-class operators in serious capital, like deep pocket capital. What would you say?
Do you want to start as an operator?
Go ahead.
Yeah. When we kind of started focusing more on this, let's say back in 2018, Brazil was obviously already a large B2B market, fairly complex. We focused very much on B2B tech investing. There were a grand total of 6 Brazilian technology companies doing $100 million in ARR. 6, right? Including Nubank, Stone, and a couple of other names. If you fast forward to 2024, that number grew by 6x. So it's proof is in the pudding that Brazil is sizable, complex, but it was way behind on this sort of technology adoption curve. And there was a clear space for this to grow a lot faster, right? And to attract more capital and talented management teams to execute on this, right? That was pretty much what attracted us back then and what attracted a lot of capital and entrepreneurs into the region, right? I don't know if from your perspective.
So we cover 25 countries today, and we started, the idea with Jeeves is really focused on global companies, so companies outside the US and companies that might need to operate in more than one country. So Brazil plus US, you don't need to have 2 bank accounts, you don't need 2 corporate cards, you can come to us, we'll give you both. And so we started really in Mexico, and then we scaled to Colombia. What was interesting is the same type of product that worked in Mexico also worked in Colombia. And then we tried to do that in Brazil, and that does not work. And it took us about 2 years to learn that. And that really, was like, okay, why is this not working? Like, and it's not working because it's not Brazilian. And you have to build it for the local market. And that took us about really 2.5 years to kind of understand. And then the flip side is once you do build it for the local market, the market is just so massive that there's so much more scale here than even some of the other countries that we cover. And today, really in the last year plus, like a little bit more than a year, Brazil is now our largest card market. And it's our second largest global market. And we expect it to be the largest one by early next year. So really in about 18 months, it's starting to accelerate and has a lot more potential. And I think the second thing to your point that's really interesting is you're starting to see a wave of founders that have exited companies that are now investing, and you have that domain knowledge of how to start a company and run a company that you might not have had 10 years ago. And that I think makes a big, big difference. People coming from Nubank, from Rappi, and that helps with the ecosystem as well. So we're starting to see much more mature companies and a lot of Brazilian companies that are then looking at going global. And so they start in Brazil and now they're like, all right, now how do we go after the US? And for us, that's a big part of where we see our growth.
So now you got to give us details. What does it mean being local in Brazil? And what are the things that you actually underappreciated when you have started tackling this market?
So from our perspective, I would say the financial system in Brazil is very sophisticated. It's honestly probably more, out of all the countries we cover, it's probably the most sophisticated financial system, both from central bank, PIX, just the adoption for technology. Like in Mexico, it's a cash-heavy society. So there's no PIX. There is, but like people don't really use it in that same way. And I think it took us a little bit of time to understand that. The other thing is both Mexico and Colombia tend to be a little bit more closer to the US. So the biggest trade partner is the US. And so what works there kind of works in Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil. It doesn't work like that. And so it took us a little bit of time to understand how the payment networks work. Pix, Boleto, TED, like there's so many that do the same thing, and coming from outside, it's like, why do you have 3 of them? But then now you kind of understand why you need 3 of them. Installments, the MFI, like all of those things take some time to kind of understand. But once you do, there's many, many areas that you can start scaling. And I think that's been a big reason that we've been growing in the last year. I think this year we've grown about 400% just in Brazil.
I like that Warburg has the luxury of focusing on very similar industries globally.